Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Most Accurate Podcast. I am your host, Addison Hayes, joined once again by one of the most accurate rankers of all time in fantasy football, John Paulson. John, how are we doing on this fine morning for you, even though it's afternoon for me?
We're doing good. We're ramping up here in July. I feel like our fantasy drafts are getting closer. I'm in a charity draft right now, which I'll actually talk about today, and just wrapped up Scott Fish Bowl. August is the meat of the off season, but we are getting close to it, and we're excited to talk about some middle round targets today.
Yes. Training camps have officially started, and we're getting those highlight clips, those, the non-padded catches and everything like that. The hype is already getting rolling. So I'm ready to get going. We do have, like you said, mid-round targets today. We're skipping over the early round targets because a lot of that, I think, is driven by just your draft slot. Obviously, in your first round, if you have the 108 and we say target Bijan Robinson, that's not applicable to you at the 108 or for a handful of other first-round picks. Second round is kind of the same. Third round and fourth round are where you can kind of deviate from ADP a little bit, but it's still, you're picking from a very select pool of players that still is kind of selected for you based on the slot that you were given or chose in the first round. But mid-round targets is where things start to really open up, and I think it's also a very pivotal point in your drafts because for me personally, there's a lot of not fun picks or flat spots, dead spots of positions and players that are just really hard to sort out. So I'm hoping what we can do today is kind of help you guys sift through a lot of that stuff. So what we did is we each took, going round by round from rounds 5 through 9, we each have our quote-unquote favorite player to draft in that round. So we can start in round 5. John, I'll have you kick it off. You actually stole my player for this one, but I was totally all right with it because I love my other player as well. But you went with Chuba Hubbard, running back for the Carolina Panthers, as your mid-round, 5th round target. So why are we drafting Chuba Hubbard in the 5th round?
Yeah, and his multi-site ADP is 501, so he technically might not be available for everyone in the 5th round, but he's the one that stands out to me with the 5th round ADP. He's going to go early in that round, and I would love to get him there at the 4 or 5 turn or even late in the 4th round. RB 12 last year in the same role. They did add Rico Dowdle, but I don't know that Dowdle's really going to have a much bigger role than Miles Sanders did last year. It might take a couple touches off of Hubbard, but I think Hubbard's the better player. He had the advantage in broken tackles. How many attempts per broken tackle? He had 2.2 yards after contact per attempt, which is actually the same as Dowdle. His rush grade was higher, 87 compared to 74.4. I think, he handled 73% of the team's backfield carries and 61% of the receptions. With Dowdle in the mix, I think that's probably going to be like 65% and 50% maybe, or 55% respectively. I don't think he's going to lose a whole lot. And Hubbard's role's relatively safe. Should be an up-and-coming offense. Bryce Young played a little bit better down the stretch. They added a first-round receiver, McMillan, moving the ball and taking some pressure off of the rest of the players. So, I like Hubbard there in a big touch role. I mean, we got to follow the touches at running back, and he's one that's going to probably see 16 to 18 touches per game.
I absolutely, like I said, you stole my pick for this one, but I was letting you go first and run through the players, so it was kind of on me. But I love Chuba Hubbard. I think he's actually a player that, if I'm there in the mid-4th, I'm looking at Chuba Hubbard already. And I mean, his ADP's early 5th, 501 is what we have him for the multi-site ADP on 4for4. But yeah, I seem like I'm to be above consensus on Chuba Hubbard from weeks 4 through 16. He was on pace for over 1,400 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns on 300 carries. And that week 4 is the first week where he received over 60% of the offensive snaps. He was playing below 60% still for the first 3 weeks. But from that week 4 on, he did not dip below 65% once, and he was much more of a, mid 70s to even 80 and 90% snap kind of a player. He was an absolute beast. The one question that I have for you, and I have seen other people bring it up as a reason to not necessarily fade Chuba for maybe why he doesn't have necessarily the highest ceiling is the receiving. He was on pace for 48 receptions from that week 4 through 16 split that I just mentioned, but only 150 receiving yards and then 3 receiving touchdowns. So he was massively inefficient through the air. And I have seen people speculate that one of the biggest reasons why they drafted Trevor Etienne early on day 3 was to take on that more pass catching role out of the backfield. And if he's, taking touches away from Chuba in the receiving game and those high value PPR touches, that might be an issue for his ceiling. Are you concerned about that at all?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a concern. Dowdle's a good receiver as well. But the driving force behind Hubbard's fantasy production is not his receiving, it's his rushing. And I think his role is solidified enough there. And, he's going off the board RB19. And I think, there's room for him he finished RB12 last year. Even if he doesn't do quite as well, he could still return or beat value without having, that same receiving role. And the other thing I'd mention is that, in the projections, he's at 187.5 PPR. Kenneth Walker's at 187. Breece Hall's at 187. James Cook's at 191. Amarian Hampton's at 192. So, I'm looking at that group and they're all going well ahead of him. I think, him as the last guy in that tier is a nice value in that mid-4th round, as you mentioned.
All right. I 100% agree, by the way. Chuba is a massive, massive target for me. My other target, though, in this same kind of range, and if I'm getting Chuba Hubbard maybe in the 4th, I might be able to get my guy in the 5th as well and get both of these, and that is James Conner. I don't really know if there's anything we really need to talk about with James Conner because it just seems like he is just perennially undervalued since joining the Arizona Cardinals. He's been the PPR RB5, RB19, RB18, and RB11, and that is in total points, but on a points per game basis, he's been inside the top 14 all 4 years. He's a 1,000-yard rusher in back-to-back seasons. The receiving volume increased last year in 2024, had 55 targets over 400 receiving yards. He's had 9 or more total touchdowns in 3 of the 4 seasons in Arizona. So we have a full bell cow. We have nice receiving work. We have touchdown upside. It's a solid offense. Maybe it has room to improve as well if, Kyler takes returns, I guess, to form of what he was a few years ago before the injury. If Marvin Harrison Jr. takes a step forward, obviously with Trey McBride, it's a really good offense, but I don't think that's a bad thing for the running back. In fact, I'd rather have my running back play in a really good offense because of that touchdown upside and scoring possibilities, which I think just lend itself to more fantasy production. So James Conner, to me, I think is when you get into the 5th round, I think he's just a very easy click to draft.
And I think he's going there due to the age thing. I think getting the age 30 season, he's already turned 30 in May. Trey Benson is interesting because of the comments that Jonathan Gannon made about him. He feels like they have 2 starting backs if Benson takes the necessary jump from year 1 to year 2. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry last year. I just wanted to mention that because I think his presence is probably driving the ADP down a little bit, but I think you still have the lead back in Arizona and James Conner. The only other thing I worry about a little bit with Conner is that he does have a tendency to get dinged up. He played 16 games last year, but he had 13 the year before, 15 in 2021, 13 in 2020, and 10 in 2019. So it was his first bullish season since 2021. So you do have to sort of bake in a bit of injury risk with him. And I think as he gets into his age 30 season, that's probably going to be enhanced a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. I think those are all good reasons for why he's down that low. He could be my RB2, even my RB3 in the 5th round, depending on how the board goes. And for a guy that, like I said, has been top 14 running back in points per game all 4 years. So when he's out there, he's producing, even if you're not having to rely on him as your RB1. Maybe if you're in a hardcore 0 RB build, maybe you are. But in most cases, you're not going to have to rely on him being an every week kind of guy because he is probably going to get dinged up. But the production is there when he's on the field. And I'm not worried about Trey Benson right now. With Conner still there, they gave him an extension last year. So I think it's just so easy to me to draft James Conner in the 5th round. So we'll move on to round 6. I'll let you talk through your whole entire situation here because you alluded to it with your charity draft and whatnot. I will say that you originally had Chris Godwin in this, which was a continuation of the first episode where we talked through some of the differences between your rankings and Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings. You were higher on Chris Godwin, but you threw an asterisk on that one. And I think the asterisk is now coming into play here. So why don't you talk through what's going on in round 6?
Yeah, Godwin's, slipped quite a bit in my projections this offseason. And I just assumed full health heading into camp, and he's just not there. And it sounded like he had he did have a second surgery. Our Jeff Muller, our injury expert at 444, found a picture of him at the uniform reveal, and his left ankle still looks swollen, and the calf looks atrophied on that side. And I'm trying to be less stubborn about my vets that I love, and if they're dinged up heading into August, how they're going to start the season, and whether or not re-injury could occur, or just lower production, or just a couple missed games at the start of the year as they get him ready. I mean, he might still have a really good season, but he's going like wide receiver 34 or something off the board, and that looked like a massive value based on his overall wide receiver 2 production last year before the injury. But now we're in this situation where you have to, sort of scale it back, your expectations, based on his injury and his recovery so far. So a little worried about him. I think you could still buy the dip with him, 7th, 8th round. I think he might fall further than where he's been drafted based on these revelations. So long story short, I was looking at him in my Data Force charity draft in the 6th round, and I had him listed here as my primary target, but I'm pivoting to Odunze. I'm very worried about this Bears offense, and that's because I'm a Packer fan. I think it's going to be a lot better with Ben Johnson at head coach. Keenan Allen is out, so now you're looking at DJ Moore and Odunze as the top 2 targets in the passing game. He is a really good route runner. According to Matt Harmon, it's, quote, still pointing us in an extremely positive direction, his charting of Odunze in his rookie year. And his 734 yards was a little disappointing, but you can understand when you have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen there, both, established stars in this league, that his numbers as a rookie weren't maybe up to snuff for a first-round pick. So he is in this offense now, and Kaleb Williams is going to take a big step forward. I think the offense as a whole will take a big step forward, and I think he has a chance. I don't think he'll outscore DJ Moore this year, but I think he has enough talent that he has a chance to, especially if Moore gets dinged up or misses a few games.
Or as lazy as a lot of people like to throw back at me, that DJ Moore was just walking off the field for snaps last year when he wasn't getting targeted. So I don't know. Maybe that's an issue that perseveres into 2025, and Ben Johnson isn't like that, and Odunze gets the more breakout role. I will say, to add on to Odunze, I talked about this in a couple of videos already on 444, and I think I talked about this last week or the week before with you, but my study on top 10 drafted rookie wide receivers who failed to surpass 900 yards in their rookie year. Of the 7 wide receivers who were in that sample set prior to last year, all 7 of them did break out at some point with a 1,000-yard season between years 2 through 4, but none of them broke out until after a coaching change happened. So that's kind of a reason why I'm a little bit hesitant on Marvin Harrison Jr. this year. We have no coaching change and no offensive coordinator change in Arizona, and yet he's still being drafted in the 3rd round. That did happen for Odunze. They had a complete overhaul of coaching staff, obviously added, the bell of the ball in Ben Johnson himself. So if, he is the as good as he is kind of foretold to be and was in Detroit, and Odunze now with this opportunity of an increased target share as the wide receiver 2, Kaleb Williams takes a step, that offensive line takes a step forward with a massive addition and upgrades, that Odunze, I think, is a better bet for that year 2 breakout than Marvin Harrison Jr. potentially because of the coaching change, yet he's going 3-4 rounds cheaper than Marvin Harrison. So I like the call on Odunze.
Yeah, he's going after because he's not the number 1 option, and Marvin Harrison theoretically is, although, Trey McBride might have something to say about that. Jameson Williams finished wide receiver 19 last year in the same offense, so I think that's certainly within reach for Odunze, top 20 finish.
So My favorite player to draft in round 6 is actually a player on my team, on my Pittsburgh Steelers. It is rookie running back Kaleb Johnson going in the mid 7th, around the 607 to be specific. To me, this is just a projection of the Steelers backfield going forward. I know a lot of people were very excited for Jaylen Warren whenever Najee Harris eventually left and then signed with the LA Chargers, that Jaylen Warren might get an increased role. They draft Kaleb Johnson in the 3rd round, which I personally was not expecting him to be there in round 3. They traded their 2nd round pick for DK Metcalf, and I thought Kaleb was going to be taken by then in the 2nd round, but he falls to the Steelers in round 3. And I absolutely love it. I think Kaleb Johnson is like a 1-for-1 replica of Najee Harris, but is a better player at this stage in his career than Najee is at this stage in his career. He's like 4 or 5 years younger. He's 21 years old, one of the youngest players in this class, and was excellent at Iowa last year, had 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns last year at Iowa, as well as 200 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving. He was 7th in the NCAA in rushing yards, 7th in the NCAA in rushing touchdowns last year, was somehow the entire Iowa offense. They went 8-5 because of him. They had 1,700 passing yards as a team, and Kaleb was out there rushing for 1,500 by himself. So he was Iowa's entire offense. And now you bring him into, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Najee Harris role, who's been a 1,000-yard rusher every single year he's been in the league, including each of the past 3 seasons without Ben Roethlisberger. 1,200 total yards each of the past 3 years, 6 to 10 touchdowns. He's been very inefficient still, but he just continues to get that volume because Mike Tomlin wants a bell cow, and Najee fit that workhorse role, and now Kaleb Johnson fits that workhorse role. So I think people are just a little bit too high on Jaylen Warren, not high enough on Kaleb Johnson. If you want a guy that I think could be the 2nd most productive rookie running back in this class behind Ashton Jeanty with a top 15 ceiling, that to me is Kaleb Johnson in the 6th round.
Yeah, the tricky thing here is how much more they're going to put on Jaylen Warren's plate, and that's just sort of, we have to guess at that right now because Arthur Smith is known to maybe not do what everybody expects him to do with his backfield shares, his receiving shares and whatnot. But I like the call. I think if he does take over that 17-touch role, you're getting a nice value there in the 6th round.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many other running backs in that round or behind him that can do what Kaleb Johnson could potentially do. Like I said, I think he's very easily, to me, the 2nd best running back to draft out of this rookie class behind Jeanty. As I mentioned there, I think he's the 2nd. He could be the 2nd, or should be the 2nd most productive running back from this class. I would take him over RJ Harvey. Harvey's going ahead of him in ADP, so you're getting a little bit of discount there. Him versus Aaron Jones, I think, is an easy decision. Him versus DeAndre Swift is an easy decision. Him versus Travion or Pacheco or Brian Robinson or Pollard or anybody like that, I think it's just very easily Kaleb Johnson in the 6th round. And maybe there's a little bit of homerism in there, but I think the stars are just aligned for Kaleb to take over the Najee Harris role and potentially even have more juice because he's so much younger and still a rookie with less tread on the tires. So we can move on to round 7 then. John, your round 7 player is, I don't know if this is going to come to any surprise to anybody, but it is Jauan Jennings going in the late 7th round. So in case anybody has missed the last couple episodes or even missed my video on 444's YouTube channel of wide receivers that I'm also heavily targeting, why do we love Jauan Jennings in the late 7th?
Yeah, this is just going to become the Jauan Jennings podcast. We should probably go ahead and just rename it. I'm just going to talk about him every week. Yeah, he actually went. I was disappointed in that charity league. He went at the 5-6 turn to Keb Wheeler. So thanks to Keb Wheeler Kaleb Johnson just went after me off the board, so I won't be able to nab him in the 7th round.
Dang.
Anyway, Jauan Jennings reported to camp. So he's holding in right now. He wants a better contract, which is understandable given him what his role is going to be this year. Brandon Ayuk doesn't seem to be close to returning. Ricky Pearsall is currently on the camp pup list and supposedly going to come off quickly, but still missing time, or will be missing time as long as he's on there, not fully healthy. So I think things are lining up for a big season for George Kittle and for Jauan Jennings, who was fantastic last year. 14th in yards per route run, according to PFF. He's being ranked. What's his wide receiver ADP?
low.
Wide receiver 38. I have him closer to, I think it's wide receiver 24. I just think he's massively undervalued. In a good offense, Kyle Shanahan's one of the best play callers, route schemers in the league. So I just think this is a good fit for him. And he outscored Ayuk when they were together for 6 games, and in the 5 games that both Debo and Ayuk were out, Jennings averaged 6.3 catches, 75 yards, 0.6 touchdowns, 8.9 targets per game. And those are low-end wide receiver 1 numbers. So it's not often you see that sort of production for a guy who's available this late in drafts. So I'm just kind of penciling him in. I think he might gain some steam now that he's back at camp, and seems to be like they're heading towards some sort of resolution on the contract. But this is lining up to be a nice value here in the 6th or 7th round.
There should absolutely be no reason on the 49ers part for them not to figure out this contract situation with Ayuk and Pearsall on the pup right now. And Pearsall could come back kind of whenever. I think the expectation is him to remain on the pup through this start of the season. Pearsall could come back at some point, but those hamstring injuries, man, I mean, he was dealing with that in June during minicamp. And if it's still lingering now and still possibly lingering through training camp and into the start of the year, those things can be dicey, and they might just have to rely on Jauan Jennings a lot. So I fully agree with you. I do think that I would like to say that he's a player that could rise in ADP to where, he is more of a 5th or 6th round player, like what happened in your charity draft. But I just don't know if he's a player that, regular people just kind of gravitate towards. And they're just like, Jauan Jennings. Sure. So I think his ADP might still stay down, maybe not late 7th, but, in the more early 7th round, maybe even in the 6th round a little bit, which I still think is very easily a value. My 7th round pick was Tony Pollard, which is basically almost a copy and paste argument from my James Conner in the 5th round to Pollard now in the 7th round. Again, just another very easy running back that I think you can just draft. Maybe if you have to plug your nose because you don't necessarily like Pollard, then do it. But I think that he's just undervalued at this point. Last 3 years, he's been the RB8, RB14, RB21 in PPR total points. 3 straight years with 1,000 plus rushing yards, 1,300 plus total yards. And he's been an Ironman. He's played 15 games every single year of his career, including 16 plus games in each of the last 3 years, which I know some people, have mentioned that maybe they're a little worried about Pollard getting dinged up and whatnot. I think that was a little bit of what happened at the end of last year with Spears' kind of 3-game surge with Pollard injured, and then a little bit of the stuff from 2022 that lingered in 2023 for his broken ankle. But he's never really missed games in season. So I think that he's the RB1 easily still for Tennessee. I know there's been comments from Callahan and whoever that they want Tyjae Spears to get more work, which I think is nice to say, but I also think that Tony Pollard is just a better running back than Tyjae Spears in every facet of the game. And if they wanted to include Tyjae Spears more, they could have last year. Even when he was a little bit banged up himself, there were plenty of opportunities where both of them were healthy and Tony Pollard just got more and more work. And if the offense is better because of Cam Ward, then I think that's just a good thing for Tony Pollard. So another guy that I think could easily outproduce his ADP could be your RB2 in the 7th round if you want to load up at the tight end position and the quarterback position before this, and draft Tony Pollard as your 2 or even 3. I think that is still phenomenal value for him in the 7th round.
I completely agree. He was going to be my pivot. I was going to move Jauan Jennings up to 6 and then take Pollard here, but then you already had him. I took him in Scott Fishbowl. Seems like people are down on him. It's funny how guys get run hot and cold in fantasy circles because a few years ago, Pollard was like the hot new toy or the hot new girl or whatever. Like everybody was into her or into him. And now it's like, he's 28. He plays for Tennessee. He's just kind of boring production. Doesn't have like a bell cow role. He's more the lead back to, Spears in another role. But if you look at last year, he did benefit a little bit from Spears' absence. He missed a few games. In those games, Pollard averaged 24.2 touches. In the games with Spears, it was 16.4, but 16.4 is still really good usage for this range in the draft. And then you have some really big upside if anything happens to Spears again. So, yeah, I've got him ranked like several spots ahead of his positional ADP, and I think he's if you want to go, hero running back and draft one in the first few rounds, and then try to grab him as your number 2, I think you're in good shape. And then this offense could be a lot better with the addition of Cam Ward at quarterback.
Easy. He's just one of the last running backs that it seems like it's on the board where he has a baseline role and then maybe not expands upon that role, but it's just like when you're debating between him and does Pacheco get a role back from that injury, or Kareem Hunt still there? Judkins is right behind him in multi-say ADP. That probably falls a little bit more because of the possible suspension or probable suspension that's coming his way, unfortunately. Brian Robinson, sure, maybe you get Tracy and Warren and Skattebo and Etienne and Mason and Charbonnet. Like it's Tony Pollard is like the last true guy that you can get at the running back position that has a baseline of touches, an upside of 20 plus touches every single week, as you just mentioned, and a possibility of playing in a better offense. It's again easy to draft Tony Pollard in the 7th round. So we'll move on to round 8. I love your wide receiver as well. He was in contention for my pick for this one. Was also in my wide receivers to target video on 444's YouTube channel. Jakobi Meyers at the early 8th round. I love this call so much, but I would love to hear even more about why you're in on him.
Yeah, and he's even, slipped in the ranking. I think it had him in the mid-20s at the start of the offseason, but they did draft Jack Beck, who Matt Harmon loves, although it sounds like he's struggling a little bit right now in camp. He's playing behind Trey Tucker and Dante Thornton, who was another rookie who's apparently looked really good. But one of my main strategies is to find these real world wide receiver ones that are going in these middle rounds, because you're getting like 120, 130 targets at the cost of a middle round pick. And they typically will, it's like the Larry Fitzgerald rule. They'll typically outproduce their draft position. And just even if they're kind of boring players like Jakobi Meyers is, he was wide receiver 31 last year, but that doesn't really tell the whole story with him. He had 12 games without Devontae Adams after that trade and also injury. And in those games, he averaged 6.1 receptions, 73 yards per game, 0.25 touchdowns, 12 half PPR points per game. Those are low-end wide receiver 2 numbers, and that's why at the start of the offseason, I had him ranked in that mid-20s. His 9.3 targets per game without Adams would have tied Drake London for the 6th most in the league over the course of the full season. And he's getting a quarterback upgrade in the form of Geno Smith. It doesn't seem like it, but Geno is definitely better than what they were dealing with at quarterback last year. He's being drafted, I believe, as a wide receiver 4. And I have him, ranked a good bit higher. Beck is kind of probably not going to pressure him. I guess the issue with Beck is that they are kind of slammed at the slot right now with Bowers, Myers, eating at most of those slots snaps. So it's going to be Thornton probably on the outside, maybe Tucker. And I think Myers is going to be that high target guy again. And, Bowers is probably really the wide receiver 1 on this team, but Myers is a close second and will be a nice safety blanket for Geno Smith.
I went through and I was looking at Chip Kelly's offense back when he was in Philadelphia for a few years in the 2010s, and then had one year in San Francisco before getting booted back down to college. But in those 3 years with Philly, the leading receiver for the Eagles in 2013, Deshaun Jackson, was the wide receiver 10 in fantasy, had 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns on 126 targets. 2014, their leading receiver, Jeremy Maclin, was the wide receiver 9 in fantasy, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns on 144 targets. And in 2015, Jordan Matthews was the wide receiver 17. He had 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns on 126 targets. The quarterbacks for Philadelphia those years, Nick Foles, Mark Sanchez, and Sam Bradford. So Chip Kelly, at least in his 3 years with Philadelphia, showcased an immense ability to give us, wide receiver 1 fantasy production, or at the very least, like mid to high end wide receiver 2 production with very productive wide receivers, and even not the greatest names at the quarterback position. I actually think Geno might be the best quarterback Chip Kelly has had in the NFL. And I think Meyers is certainly in contention with, at least Jeremy Maclin for a wide receiver talent. And Maclin was a wide receiver 9, as I mentioned, 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns in this offense. So I think maybe he doesn't necessarily have like that upside on a whole entire yearly basis because Brock Bowers is there. And maybe that's just to say that Brock Bowers is going to be the one getting 1,310 in this offense, which at the tight end position would be absolutely insane. But I would not count out Jakobi Meyers as a guy that, is just like this PPR-y kind of safety blanket guy. I think that he has a little bit more upside than people are giving him credit for, and could be, a very easy flex option for you in the 8th round more often than not. My round 8 pick, and Paulson, I'm hoping that you like this one because I'm picking one of your Green Bay Packers. It's Jayden Reed at the back end of the 8th round. I think I said this before on this YouTube channel, but I believe that Jayden Reed has the potential to be the best fantasy football pick in 2025 at this 8th round ADP. I think that he has the possibility to be the breakout wide receiver of the year and massively outproduce this wide receiver like 40 ADP that he's got going on right now, which I totally understand why he's down there. The Packers have played this wide receiver by committee. They even drafted Matthew Golden in the 1st round. Jayden Reed himself has just been this kind of more low volume, highly explosive, highly efficient player. But he doesn't play in 2 wide receiver snaps. I get all those concerns and I get why, he's down here in this wide receiver 40 range, but man, anybody with eyeballs can see that this dude is just so freaking talented. You just need to get the ball in his hands more. And we have other examples of players like Jayden Reed who entered their year 3 season, having shown already in their first 2 years on lower volume that they just need the ball more. They got the ball more in year 3, and they had massive seasons. Tyreek Hill, 19% target share in year 2, went to 23% target share in year 3, ended up having 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns with the Kansas City Chiefs as a top 3 fantasy wide receiver. In year 2, Tyreek Hill averaged 11.3 yards per target, 13.5 yards per touch. Jayden Reed last year in year 2, 11.4 yards per target, 13.6 yards per touch. Deebo Samuel did the exact same thing. He had a really efficient, low-volume rookie season, then got hurt in year 2, only played 7 games. But in that year 3, with higher volume, ended up having 1,800 total yards and 14 touchdowns. That was Deebo's like 1 year. It was the Deebo Samuel year, essentially, that we're still hoping that he can get back to at this point. But as a rookie in 1 full season that he played before year 3, 10 yards per target, 13.5 yards per touch. Brandon Ayuk was very similar. He had a big year 3 and then an even bigger year 4. But in year 3, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. And the year prior to that, Ayuk averaged 10 yards per target, 13.8 yards per touch. So Jayden Reed is right in there. And I think that, LaFleur just needs to be like, hey, I just need to get the ball to this guy a little bit more. I think that would be a very smart thing to give the ball to Jayden Reed a little bit more. I'm really not at all concerned about Matthew Golden. I'm pretty low on him as a prospect overall. And I think that he's honestly a good thing for Jayden Reed because if he's the competition, then I think that you should just get the ball to Jayden Reed even more. So as long as he's playing in 2 wide receiver sets, and I'm expecting big things out of Jordan Love and this Packers offense just in general this year to get back to throwing a lot more like they did at the beginning of the year last year and in 2023. I think Jayden Reed is going to be a big time player this year for fantasy football.
That's a lot to digest as a Packer fan. I like where your head's at. I'm glad that you like him as a player. He is a good player. I think just based on his ADP, and I'm looking at my rankings. I'm too low on him. I probably would take him over some of the guys ahead of him. I have him a wide receiver 40 right now, but the issue is the spread it around offense. I mean, last year he did finish as a high end wide receiver 3, wide receiver 25. You could call that low end wide receiver 2. So even if he just does what he did last year and the targets dipped from 5.9 per game to 4.4 per game, which is alarming given like his production. Even if he's able to do what he did last year, you're getting like 15 spots of value out of him. And if they do what you're saying and they actually do play him in 2 receiver sets and they do feed him 7-8 targets per game and a couple carries a game, then high end wide receiver 2 numbers are within reach. The issue with it is they just have been like this under Matt LaFleur, where they spread it around. He hasn't, I think he went from 58% snaps to 62% last year. So it's just a little alarming. I guess at wide receiver 40, it's not that big of a deal. If his ADP were to rise, then you start to wonder if he can return, if he's going to get enough volume to return this sort of value. But I think at where he's going, it's a great pick. He was 18th in yards per route run, 10th in yards after the catch per reception. His efficiency is outstanding. And if you're right on Golden, Christian Watson's out and you're right on Golden and he's a slow learner or doesn't have a good rookie season, then Reed's going to have to be the one to play a little bit more and to step up at the receiver position.
Yeah, I with Christian Watson basically not playing this year, I'm not high on Matthew Golden. Dontavian Wicks can't catch, and Romeo Doubs is boring. It's give the ball to Jayden Reed. It's a very easy formula here that the Packers should just give the ball to Jayden Reed, and usually good things have happened. And like I said, I think you made the biggest point is that even if he doesn't break out at all this year, and you just get what he did the past 2 years as a rookie and in year 2, which, by the way, year 2, the reason why I think his targets went down a lot, they threw 100 fewer times in 2024 than they did in 2023. And I think a big reason of that is because of Jordan Love's groin injury in week 8, where they basically then just said, here, Josh Jacobs, you can win games by scoring 5 times every single week. And that's just how we're going to play it. So, but I think they want to throw the ball. They did at the end of the early parts of 2024. They did all in 2023. They threw like 570 times that year, and Jayden Reed can get more targets than he has in previous years. So it's, again, I think it's just a safety pick, but then there's also massive, massive upside that you're not getting in that 9th round with Jayden Reed.
I like it.
8th round. Let's do it. Round 9. You have 2 players, and I like both calls on 2 players, but I didn't know we were doing 2 players. So why don't you break them both down? Because I do like both of them, and especially if you can maybe get one in the 9th, one in the 10th, or maybe you get one in the early or the late 8th, and then the other one in the 9th. I do like that. But let's run through both of these players for you.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes follow the rules, but I've been on this podcast I think for 14 or 15 years, so I just kind of do what I want. At times, if I want to talk about 2 players in the 9th round, I'm going to. I thought this would be interesting from if you need a running back discussion or if you need a receiver discussion. There's a couple of different directions that I might go, and I think that Cam Skattebo for the Giants probably wins the starting job sooner rather than later. We did talk about him, I believe, last week as well, but he was, I think, second in the PFF rushing grade in college, second only to Ashton Genty. He's also already taken over the pass catching role there from Tyrone Tracy, who's not very good in pass protection. And I think he's probably going to be the superior runner as well. Tyrone Tracy was a nice story. He had a good season, but they got a nice player in Skattebo. And, I just feel like it's going to be sooner rather than later that he ends up taking over this backfield. So in the 9th round, I think he's a good bet. Now, you're not getting sure touches like you are with Pollard in the 7th, but you're getting some upside, I think, and he could certainly produce whatever Tracy produced last year, and those were like RB2 numbers, right? So we'll see. We'll see how long it takes or if he struggles at all. But the metrics all say that he's the better running back, 3-down back. So I like him. And then I wanted to also mention, if you need a receiver, Josh Downs is going in this range. Anytime Matt Harmon is just completely in love with a player's route running, I pay attention. It's led me to some really nice picks with Tyreek Hill and with Tyler Lockett. And sometimes he's a little early, and it takes a year or 2 for the player to truly break out. But this is a position, 9th round, Josh Downs just needs to stay healthy. Might get some upgraded quarterback play if it's Daniel Jones. And I know that sounds weird, but Daniel Jones is proven capable. I think having a good season. His rookie season was good. I think he just needed a change of scenery and get out of that New York market. And if he wins that job, I think this is a good situation for Josh Downs as the Amon-Ra St. Brown of this offense. I think he's clearly the best route runner. Michael Pittman's okay, but not at Downs' level. And he just will provide lots of layups for Jones or for Richardson if it's Richardson who wins. So 9th round, 10th round, if he's still on the board, good value for him. I think he can really produce given his route running skill.
I love both of these calls. We did talk about Skattebo a little bit last week, just because I think we were talking about Tyron Tracy and why we're kind of down on Tyron Tracy. Biggest reason why is because we're both kind of a little bit higher on Skattebo, and you're getting basically a 1-round discount on Skattebo versus Tracy. Tracy's more of an early or late 8th. I guess you're not getting a full round, but you're getting about a half a round of a discount. Tracy is generally going first compared to Skattebo, but we both believe that Skattebo has the upside to just completely take over this backfield. And especially if that offense is any better, maybe with Russell Wilson, maybe that's Jackson Dart, and Skattebo is getting a good amount of touches. We've already seen Tracy do well in that offense, but Skattebo I think is just better. Josh Downs, I also really like that too. He seems to be a very popular late round pick. It's weird that I've seen like everybody talk about Josh Downs, and yet his ADP really hasn't moved. So he's a very, very popular name to draft late. That's one of the reasons why I kind of go more towards Jayden Reed, is because I see Reed and Downs kind of very similarly in ADP, but I find myself gravitating more towards Jayden Reed than Josh Downs, because I think the offense is going to be better, even though I think Josh Downs is a phenomenal wide receiver. Loved him coming out of college out of North Carolina, and has been very, very good with very subpar quarterback play. So if Daniel Jones is the best quarterback that he's played with so far, behind a much better offensive line than what he had in New York, which could be massively beneficial for Daniel Jones, and then also good for Josh Downs, who you got to remember, like, could be, maybe he's not the Malik Neighbors of this offense, but Wan'Dale Robinson had like 250 targets last year as well, and was highly inefficient with them. So if Josh Downs just becomes his new Wan'Dale, and it's just a hyper-targeted wide receiver, Josh Downs is so much better than Wan'Dale Robinson, and can do a lot of good things with that. So another good click in the 9th round. My 9th round pick is Dak Prescott at the middle of the 9th. And if I were to throw in another player in here to match year 2, it would also be Brock Purdy. So I like taking the shots on both quarterbacks in the 9th rounds. Not so much to say that I'm like always bypassing the early round quarterbacks in the top 4, top 5, or even Baker or Bo Nix or somebody like that. But if the draft board falls a good way, I think Dak Prescott is a very easy pick in the 9th round. And Brock Purdy is a very good pick as well. If I had to choose between the two, I'd probably lean more towards Dak for the upside, because he has shown it basically every single year that he's played at least 16 games over the past 6 seasons since 2019. He's been the QB2, the QB7, the QB3, which coincidentally enough happens to be every other year as well. So if that trend continues, we're in line for a very big 2025 for him to play a full set of games and be very, very productive with it. You look at what Russell Wilson did under Brian Schottenheimer. The last time Schottenheimer called plays was in Seattle with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, QB8, QB5, QB6. They added George Pickens in this offense. So, I mean, I think you can argue that this is the best receiving career that Dak Prescott has had in his entire career, with a prime CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens kind of entering his prime as a very, very good wide receiver too. Still with Jake Ferguson at tight end, who's just a solid, trustworthy guy. And in this 9th round, I think if you're looking for stacks, I mean, a lot of people, if you draft Jamar Chase, you're looking at Joe Burrow. If you draft A.J. Brown, you're looking maybe at Jalen Hurts or somebody like that. But after a certain point, you just get to where, you can't really stack anybody else at like, you're either going to stack a really bad quarterback with a good wide receiver, or you're going to stack a bad wide receiver with a good quarterback. But Dak, I think, is in a nice spot to where you're stacking him with CeeDee Lamb. And so you have an elite upside wide receiver, and you have an elite, possibly elite upside quarterback as well if he can stay healthy. So I think that he just is a very easy bet of quarterbacks taking outside the top 12 right now who could finish inside the top 10 or even top 5, as he's done in 2 of the last 3 times that he's played a full 16 games.
I like it. I just pulled up the quarterback multi-site ADP, and this is an interesting year. I think there's just a lot of depth at the position. You get past Burrow, and then you're into Mayfield, Nix, and Mahomes, Kyler Murray kind of going in the 5th to 7th round range. And then there's just a lot of guys going in the 9th to 11th there's going to be some surprises out of here that finish in the top 12. I mean, you got Brock Purdy, Justin Fields, Caleb Williams, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Drake May, Jordan Love in the 11th round. You could do a Reed Love stack pretty cheaply. CJ Stroud and JJ McCarthy. And that's a number of guys, eight or nine guys there before you even get to the, you're at QB 19, before you even get to the Trevor Lawrence Tua, range. So it's in best ball. It's like, I think my plan is if I don't get some value with an elite quarterback, going a round or two later than their ADP, I just want to grab two of these guys in the 9th through 11th and have a little, committee going and, just take the top score each week, because these are some talented dudes that have finished as QB1s or even top 5, or even played that at top 5 level for a stretch. And they're going, in the double-digit rounds sometimes. So I like the call of waiting. Late round quarterback is often works, but I think this year, especially given all the scoring that's available here in these rounds, it's a very viable strategy.
All right, so there we go. Those are our favorite targets in rounds 5 through 9. Next week, we're going to be running through our late round targets. So we're just basically going to open up the draft board from round 10 on. We're going to run through our favorite guys that we like to draft late in drafts that hopefully have upside, that maybe have a little bit of an extra floor, anything like that in the later rounds. So appreciate everybody for tuning in, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast feed. Hit that like and subscribe button if you could, please. That would greatly help us out. If you are interested in signing up for a 4for4 subscription, you can do so using the promo code YouTube at checkout. That will get you 25% off any plan that we have on 4for4, whether that's the basic plan that just helps you to get, projections and rankings from John Paulson, or the betting and DFS plans that seem to win money every single year. I'm in those Discords as well. I'm very profitable from all the calls from Connor and Noonan and everybody like that. So code YouTube, 25% off on any of those plans. So we appreciate you guys sticking around with us. Have a fantastic weekend, and we will catch you guys next week with another episode of the most accurate podcast. See you.